Hey, what's up? I'm back with another MBTI slash philosophy kind of video. Now, what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about Friedrich Nietzsche, the guy who's the undeserving poster boy for nihilism. You know, I mean, I know, yeah, oh my gosh, they take him out of context. Nietzsche isn't actually a nihilist, he's actually an existentialist. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me because his Ubermensch idea is the only thing that I can't, go along with. I remember having a conversation with some friends and they asked me if I, you know, liked Nietzsche's quotes. Well, actually, it was only one friend that asked me if I liked Nietzsche's quotes, and I said with all honesty, yeah, I do dig his quotes out of context. That is completely, and, yeah, just like out of context because I used to wonder for so long if Nietzsche had the intellectual capacity to, absorb all of nihilism and understand that everything's meaningless and doesn't actually make any sense. I don't understand how he can comprehend this Ubermensch idea of his. I guess loosely translated as Superman, the Superman, if you will, something like that, or whatever. And it made no sense to me because I think as an INTP, straight up, and yes, this is the part where I'll get to the MBTI aspect of it and whatnot. To me, it's a straightforward to say that life is meaningless. So as you continue to live, you live meaninglessly with pointless distractions and whatnot. None of it has any real significance. It's all just cope. And I've said throughout, a bunch of my videos that essentially I pretty much just see life as cognitive dissonance. Like, we're all gonna die, yet we're acting as if we know we're gonna live to like see the next day, even though we always know in the back of our heads that, death is creeping up and we'll just be an empty blank nothingness forever. But Nietzsche though, who's apparently an INTJ, I guess it sort of made more sense to me why he can, I guess, comprehend nihilism, but also go towards an existentialist path or have this idea of like, an Ubermensch. I mean, I still don't agree with it, but I guess in terms of like his psychological processing, assuming that he is an INTJ, I guess it is a very like down the line sort of thing because the whole pursuit of, I guess, like finding what makes sense for you, taking this like existentialist sort of route, I guess it is very like NI in this case. And I think for Nietzsche, it kind of makes me think that it's more so this like metaphysical thing that he has with like nihilism, if I can say that. Because I think for Nietzsche, he sees it as a sort of like catalyst to like, jump in to find like what makes sense for you. Because, to be the Ubermensch, the superhuman, the Superman, quote unquote, you're off on like your own journey, I guess. And I guess in contrast to, let's say what a superhero is, what is a superhero? One that, quote unquote, like conquers, right? Or saves the day, quote unquote. So they're always looking out on like their objective and like their pursuit. So it has this very like NI down the line sort of thing with TE in need for like execution because that's basically an INTJ. Well, like top two functions, NI and TE. Now, I guess if you look at this in like a path sort of way, you do kind of see where he's coming from, but I guess I just can't roll with it because like as an INTP, I'm more of an explanatory kind of person. I don't see things as maybe like a sequence of like events, quote unquote, which is why SE and NI and SE are, on the same axis because they always feed onto each other in terms of what will the potential be of something. Like especially like NI to SE sort of people, like higher NI people and like lower on the lower, like end of it. And I have thought for so long that like right here in the here and now, life is nothing other than, pure emptiness. So in a way, I guess Nietzsche's like avoidance of nihilism, but like his intellectual like recognition of it is more of like some sort of like made up fuel that makes him want to go and like pursue stuff because I mean if you're an NI dominant, so like an INTJ or like an INFJ, tell me if SE ever does feel nihilistic to you, and in a way maybe that's why you avoid it in terms of your, inferior SE sort of like issue. But for me personally, I've always thought that, okay, right here, right now, there is nothing. So people are always influenced either by their past or the potential of what their future might be. Because right here in the here and now, we are constantly stagnant and there is just like nothing there whatsoever. We just exist. All of our ideas are borrowed from past experiences, and I know this especially as somebody with SI, or the idea of what may go ahead forward. And the thing about NI people is that there's a fixation with time, I guess. There's a fixation with like time in terms of what you will do, planning and going ahead forward, because, kind of like what I've already said, NI has this very like down the line sort of, approach. But I think as like a TI dominant, I don't need to see things in sequences. I just need to see the constant, I guess, like one explanation for myself, I guess. And because I would rationalize that time isn't really real, and I think this is what I've noticed, especially with people that are either like high NI or like high SI, they're very attached to the idea of time just on different ends. Like SI dominance will be fixated on the past, NI dominance will be fixated towards, yes, what will be going on here. But I think because we live in this constant state of like emptiness, and I think that's why inferior SE people are always trying to zoom in on like whatever the potentials are going to be, because they can't handle just how, I guess, like meaningless everything is here. I think it's different for me because, see, I can already explain that, and it just like, and it makes sense because time isn't really real. We only exist in the here and now, if you can even consider that time, I guess, because every single time people talk about time, it's typically towards beginning and end, or how long something will be. But in a way, right here, right now is, is nothing, is blank. There's nothing to record because it's just constantly happening, like seconds by. Like, I guess if you think about it, you're constantly in the past and you're constantly in the future. That's how contradictory and nonsensical, you know, the notion of like time actually is, because we just exist here. And at one point we won't. See, I don't even have to specify time specifically. Like, how long do humans usually live? What, like 90 years, blah blah blah, something, something along those lines, let's say. But I can just say for certain with an explanation, so I don't necessarily need to reference time as an INTP and an explanatory, like high TI analytical human being. I would just say that, okay, I exist, and at one point I will never exist. So this is a facade, and this is super fake. So I guess it clarifies a whole bunch of things for me as to like why Nietzsche sees nihilism as a projection into finding something meaningful. But I mean, I don't know, I just can't deal with like the facade, I guess. I mean, I don't know if this video is like low-key a diss towards like NI-DOMs like in general. I apologize if it comes off that way. I'm not genuinely not trying to do it, because like I am thinking about philosophy here, but yes, I am combining it with like MBTI and stuff like that, because I have been thinking about Nietzsche quite recently, especially in regards to nihilism and how, oh, well, okay, see, this is the thing though. Also, I have been thinking about how I do agree with Nietzsche, for example, in the sense that like, oh, God is dead, in a way that like religion isn't really going to be useful for like humanity anymore, because we can see all the lies, we can see all the facades, and we can see humanity's like desperate need to project some like made up figure that's going to take care of them. Because as long as you can't, like justify or explain this figure, you can always have the neat, tidy little tidy excuse of, oh, this is a supreme being, so we can't comprehend its, like glory, which is, I think, again, just as hypocritical and just as contradictory. Because if you're going to go out of your way to like devote your life to God, explaining God, justifying, the existence of God, but any shortcoming is, or even without any shortcomings, you have to like naturally go with the axiom that because you're talking about a, higher than human, supreme being sort of like figure, then of course from the get-go you still just naturally admit that you can never actually fully sort of like comprehend it. So there's always some sort of like, I guess, made up sort of like mysticism towards it, or something like that, or like some sort of like an appeal. And I find it kind of ironic because I think in a way like Nietzsche acts no differently with like the idea of meaning, with like the idea of like being like like a superhuman, quote unquote, because he has all these ideas about like, oh, get rid of like slave morality, which is basically attacking Christianity, or we could even just say like religions in general, which like, yeah, I would agree with, because all this morality, all this like idea of truth, like all of it is like made up, but yet it does this like hypocritical double standard thing where, oh, because you decide what that is, it's somehow different. And I guess like it kind of just calls back to me like the memes in terms of like, I guess if Nietzsche's trying to preach that, oh, you need to find your own meaning and like live for yourself, if you're inspired by his philosophy, doesn't it kind of just like cancel out, I suppose? So I guess it kind of makes sense to me that like essentially like mindless hedonism is just the way to go, because, oh, you just distract yourself with whatever there is like some sort of like joy or something, and it's like mindless, yeah, which I, again, like there's no like argument to make about it. It's like wasting away, but like I can fully admit that because we are just wasting away, and life truly just does not like matter at all. So if I'm trying to like I'm trying to use like the right words here, I kind of just see that like, okay, Nietzsche's idea of nihilism is like a made up metaphysical like trajectory like for his NI. Like he doesn't actually see it as a, I guess like notion that's there. It's more like a I don't know, a feeling of discomfort that needs to be like projected upon. And I guess, yes, this is just my bias as like a higher sort of like any person, but I've always seen people with like NI typically just do this thing where like they need to project for like their own like security and safety. They need this like one trajectory like pathway sort of thing, where if it just goes this way and I follow everything according to plan, I have this like sense of like control that is just like made up, because nobody has control of anything and this life is just a lie and a facade. So I think like as an INTP, me just like explaining everything away, I'm just like, yeah, this is a joke. And it's just like, it's yeah, it's all just nonsensical. And they always say TI is detached like in that regard. So I guess when I think of nihilism, I'm just like, yeah, there's nothing more and nothing less, because that's just nothing. So in conclusion, life is meaningless, I would say.